It is time for our Monday catch-up with the Prime Minister. This morning, not the Prime Minister, but the incoming Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, who is with us for his very first interview here in the studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. The feet are still just sort of getting back down onto earth again after a pretty whirlwind sort of 3 or 4 days. I think it's been 3 or 4 days. It feels like weeks, but it's been pretty amazing time.
Yeah, absolutely. When did you first find out that the Prime Minister was considering standing down?
Look, we've had conversations over a period of time. She confirmed with me sort of about a week before we got together.
But last year you knew that it was on the cards, right?
I knew that she was considering whether she had enough to keep on going.
So you've had quite a long time to think about what your government might look like.
Yeah, no, yes and no. I've had an opportunity over the summer to take a break, and I wanted to do that because I also knew that if I was going to take on a bigger challenge, this year, that I wanted to make sure I was coming back re-energised and refreshed. So to some extent, I wanted to make the most of that opportunity because I don't know that there'll be much more of an opportunity for that in the next 9 months, and so I have made the most of that.
All right, so you have made the most of it. You had to have a think about it, and the number one thing that you want to tackle is the economy. That's been the clear message from you yesterday. What economic credentials do you have?
Look, we have, I think, a proud economic track record as a government.
You personally?
Look, Grant Robertson is going to be our Minister of Finance. I'm here to lead the government. I think if you look at the work that I have done as a minister, I can grip up a policy brief quite quickly when I need to, but Grant's going to continue to lead our economic strategy.
There'll be people at home, though, who say, and these are centrist voters who might be looking at Chris Luxon because he's run an airline or whatever, looking at these guys who've got business experience and saying, we are going into economic headwinds. What have you ever done with business?
Well, I think the thing that New Zealand, what I think I do bring is an understanding of the day-to-day lives of New Zealand families and the sort of pressure that they'll be facing and the sort of things that they're going to be concerned about. They're going to be concerned about their mortgage interest rates. They're going to be concerned about how much it costs to buy stuff at the supermarket. They'll be concerned about their power bill and their petrol bill. Those are things that I understand. I understand what the issues are that are driving New Zealanders. And I want to make sure that my government is absolutely focused on those core bread and butter issues that are important to New Zealanders.
Which is politics, right? You understand politics and you've been in it for a very long time. Do you see yourself as a career politician?
Well, this is a political role. By definition, anyone who puts their hand up to be a member of Parliament is choosing politics as a career. That includes Christopher Luxon, includes everyone who's in Parliament. By definition, if we put our hands up, we're choosing to enter a career in politics.
But others have done stuff before, right? This has been a career for you from the get-go.
Look, I've been committed to public service for my whole life. That is absolutely correct, and that is going to stay that way. I want to make New Zealand a better place. I want to leave New Zealand in better shape than I found it.
Right. Speaking of better shape than when you found it, the Labour Party, the polls have been in a bit of a nosedive for a year and a half now. If you look at the Taxpayer Curio poll, it's almost 20% drop down, and I know it was very high and unusually high, that sort of thing. What's your poll target? When are you in danger from your colleagues, do you think? Oh, look,
we're going to win. That's the goal. And there's still 9 months to go until the election, and I think New Zealanders will want to see what I'm about. They'll want to see what my priorities are, and they'll want to see what I do in the job. We've been through a really tough year. There's no question about it. When I rewind back and I look at where we started this time last year, gosh, the world has changed during that time. And so our priorities need to change as a result of that as well. We are in a very different position to what we were a year ago.
But just coming back to the polls, I mean, if you went into the 20s, if Labour went into the 20s under your leadership, do you think you'd have a mandate to stay there?
Like I said, our focus is going to be winning. I don't have a plan B. I don't intend to have a plan B. We are absolutely relentlessly focused on making sure that we deliver strong and stable government to New Zealand, because the government will still be the government right up until election day, and we'll be focused on governing the country, and then we will be focused on winning the election.
Fair enough. Key to that is sort of separating yourself, distancing yourself from the government that you were just a part of, which is an awkward thing to do. What's one thing or a couple of things that that former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern did that you wouldn't have done? Things that you think, oh, this is not going to go well with voters?
Look, we're different people. We've got a different style. And as I've indicated, I'm going to take a little bit of time with my colleagues to work through the government.
But give us some examples. I mean, there must be a few things that you watched happen and you thought, Why are we doing this?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to start making policy pronouncements without working through those with my colleagues first. Yes, there will be some reprioritisation. I think one of the things that our government has recognised is that the public feel that we're doing too much too fast.
Yep.
And I think we do need to consolidate a little bit. And
So that was mismanaged?
No, not necessarily. I think.
Well, whose fault was that?
Well, I think, again, a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, we were in a very different position to the one we're in now.
Yeah, but the world changes quickly. Obviously, you didn't change quick enough.
And well, maybe. But right now, we need to refocus on those core issues that New Zealanders want to see us.
We'll talk about some of those in a sec. Will you rule out changing the election date now that it's been set?
No, look, when you look at the dates available for the election and you weigh up all of the other things that you've got to juggle around an election, including getting the budget passed before the election, it's the logical date.
So that won't change?
No.
No, OK, cool. Let's move on then. I know you're not going to do the rule in, rule out game. But you're
going to try anyway, I can tell.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not, because that's boring for people at home. So what I'm going to do is avoid the rule in, rule out and go with, you said you're a straight up kind of guy, you speak your mind and you tell us how you feel about things. So I just want to get a sense of your values on a couple of issues. So I won't ask you, for example, the capital gains tax question, but I will ask you, is the tax system fair?
I think we should always look at how we can make the tax system fairer. I think overall, there are some New Zealanders who perhaps aren't contributing their fair share.
Who are they?
Well, look, I think let's start. Okay, you've asked about value, so I'll start right at the core value. If you work hard, you should be able to get ahead. There are people now working really, really hard. Some of them might be working multiple jobs and they're not feeling that they can get ahead. They are contributing enormously to New Zealand and to our prosperity, but they are feeling that they're not able to get ahead. We need a tax system that recognises that, that actually makes sure that those who are really striving, who are putting in the hard yards, actually feel the reward for that. It's not just about tax, though. It's also about incomes. Tax ultimately is calculated based on income.
But one's got to pay for the other, right? Well,
yes, but yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you a practical, real-world example that I've dealt with over the last 5.5 years. People have said to me, I'm a teacher or I'm a nurse. I could go to Australia and I could, get a better salary in Australia. They pay overall higher rates of tax in Australia. Those taxes then pay the salaries of those teachers and those nurses. We can't divorce those issues. We need to increase incomes.
Yeah.
Tax is only one part of that conversation.
Yeah, but fundamentally you believe the tax system is unfair and is weighted against salary and wage earners just as a line in the sand.
Look, what I've said is that we'll always look for how we can make the tax system fairer.
The RNZ-TVNZ merger, I'm not going to ask you whether you'll ditch it because you'll say I'm not playing that game. That's fine. But do you know how much is being spent right now on consultants while you guys make up your mind about whether you'll actually go through with it or not?
No, of course I don't have that figure off the top of my head.
Can I tell you that the average on consultants apparently for this merger is $6,000 a week, some up to $9,000 a week. When will you decide whether or not you'll drop it? Because we're footing the bill for this in the meantime.
Look, we'll be making haste on all of those issues, and I think New Zealanders can.
What's the time frame?
Within the next few weeks, you're going to see quite a lot of clarity from us around our re-prioritization.
All right. Bureaucrats. Do we have too many public servants, do you think?
Look, I object to the use of the word bureaucrats.
Public servants.
In terms of the overall number of public servants, as a proportion of the workforce, it's actually stayed the same or is even slightly smaller than it was when we became the government. The population has grown. And so, yes, the number of public servants that we have has grown, but there's been a bit of, it's not since we became government, it's over the longer time period. We've kind of caught up with population growth.
Okay.
And when we're talking about public servants, we're talking about people like corrections officers, we're talking about police officers.
Totally, and no one will argue with you on those. But let's talk about communications staff. When you came into power, there were 339 of them across the public service. Now there is more than 500. That is a 50% increase in communications staff. It's costing us, the taxpayer, an extra $21 million a year. Is that out of control?
I think let's be clear about what we're talking about with communication staff. There hasn't been an increase in what you might call spin doctors, the people who are dealing with the media on a daily basis. The big increase in communications has been in that kind of online engagement area. People are wanting to engage with the public service differently. They're wanting to access information about the public services that are available to them differently. They don't want to go to a website and find a whole lot of information that they can't understand. They want to know that it's written in plain language. A lot of those communication communications staff are doing that kind of work.
Are on Twitter or Facebook or whatever.
No, they're doing the work about making sure that the communications government has about what support is available to New Zealanders is actually accessible and understandable.
So you don't see any problem with that increase, a 50% increase over the time you were in office?
No, because the overall communications landscape has changed.
All right. Business sentiment, obviously the lowest in like 50 years, really bad for you guys. There's a feeling that Labor doesn't listen to business. What is your message to business this morning? Will you look at resetting immigration again? Will you look at the 7-day isolation period? We had small business owners writing to us this morning saying, I can't run my business.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot in that question. We will absolutely be working constructively with business. I recognise that business's success is going to be New Zealand's success, and I want my government to work very closely with business so that businesses can succeed in New Zealand, because actually that's going to create better, well-paying jobs for New Zealand families and allow families to get ahead. I have worked, constructively with business leaders here in Auckland during my time as Minister of Education, as Minister of Police, and previously as Minister for COVID-19 response. I'm absolutely going to continue to do that. Issues around immigration, of course, are front of mind at the moment.
Okay.
We've got but there's a global skills shortage. But I also want to note, and when I've spoken to business leaders, they also recognise this. We've got thousands of young New Zealanders who are what we call NEET, not engaged in education, training or employment. We need to get them into the labour force, and we need to work with business to do that. I'm not going to write those young Kiwis off. So I'm not going to say that the only way we can solve our labour shortage is through immigration. Immigration is part of the answer, but actually getting those young New Zealanders engaged in the labour market, getting them into work, getting them trained, that has to be a focus, and we need to do that with business. Government can't do that alone. Business needs to be working with us on it.
The Prime Minister late last year indicated that there would be a number of policies they would drop this year, and set about asking ministers to come back with advice on what could drop or what could change. What did you advise the Prime Minister that you, in your portfolios, that could go?
Look, I'm not going to preempt the discussions that we had.
Okay, can I ask you
the way Cabinet government operates is, of course, we make these decisions collectively. Individual ministers, of course, will have spent the summer thinking about their views on their portfolio areas. Now we've got to get together and actually work through those.
I agree. So will you be basing all of your decisions on the work that Jacinda Ardern has asked for? Or are you, as the incoming Prime Minister, going to clean the slate and say, actually, no, whatever Jacinda had going on, I'm ignoring, and I'm going to ask for my own advice from my own officials and ministers on what I should scrap? Or are you just sort of taking over from her, taking her lead?
Oh, look, the advice that was being prepared will be coming to me. We haven't made decisions around the re-prioritization process yet. I will be leading that process. And yes, there'll be the opportunity to free up some energy and some resource to focus in on more pressing priorities. And that will mean some new ideas as well.
Are you a caretaker Prime Minister?
Absolutely not. I'm in this to win it.
But in the meantime, can you really do that much without being elected? Look, and with a polling at just over 30%?
In one day in government, you can do an awful lot. I'm absolutely going to make that most of the 9 months that we've got ahead of us, and I'm looking forward to 3 more years after that, because I am confident that we can win the support of the New Zealand public to continue the work that we are doing.
Let's very quickly talk about keeping accountable. That was one of the criticisms of the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, still Jacinda Ardern, was that when something went wrong, let's take the entrenchment issue with Three Waters last year, it was, oh, well, we all make mistakes and we're all collectively owning it, as opposed to that minister made a mistake and they deserve to be reprimanded, and that is how you actually improve performance. Are you willing to name who the minister was that stuffed that up last year, and tell us why what they did was wrong?
Look, I'm looking forward, not backwards. But what I will say, and I think New Zealanders have seen this from me, is when I have made a mistake, I have owned it and I'll fix it. When others make a mistake, I expect the same from them. That's my expectation going forward. I'm not going to look backwards, okay. I'm looking forwards.
Okay, but there'll be no, or we all make mistakes and together it was our fault. There'll be none of that kumbaya stuff from you.
It depends very much on the circumstances. Some mistakes are collective mistakes.
Yeah, but that one wasn't.
Well, look, I'm not going to go, like I said, I'm not going to go back over that. That issue was resolved at the time.
Well, if it wasn't, you would.
But it has been resolved and I'm not going to go back over it. But moving forward, absolutely, mistakes happen. We're human beings. Yeah, political leaders are human beings, and if we ask them not to be human and not to ever make mistakes, then we're asking them probably not to do much. And actually, if you're going to be in politics, you're there to make a difference. Sometimes you'll make a mistake. Own it. That's what I will do, and that's what I expect.
Refreshing. Thanks so much for that, Chris Hipkins, the incoming Prime Minister and Labor leader.